just become best friends?
Yep!
What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another advanced mechanics guide by the reigning, sustaining, Vermintide mechanical training YouTube in-depth guide explaining? Never mind. What's up, guys? Party Knife here, hoping you brought a towel, because today we're diving deep into what is arguably the single most important mechanic in all of Vermintide, movement. That's right, and before you go, aww, how the hell are you gonna initiate a bloodbath berserking rat-wrecking rampage without just a little bit of movement? On a serious note, think about it this way. Movement, and thus positioning, is the only variable in the game that you can mechanically manipulate, through which the potential value or lack thereof of all other player inputs are determined, and at its core directly relates to strategic decision making, as it ultimately determines your initial conditions and thus options when faced with a threat. In other words, positioning is a significant part of success in Vermintide, and movement is its architect.
But Party Knife, what does all of this mean?
Plot twist. I have no idea. Just kidding, I'm in a video on the internet, which by default makes me an expert. So first up, following this guide and listings, we're starting off with a few tips for the most important key bindings, followed by a quick guide to the flaming flail that I accidentally left out of the Unchained guide due to an editing error, and I decided to put it here as it's crucial to understanding some of the Unchained clips that I'll use as examples later. Now, if technicals bore you, you might want to consider skipping part 1 and 2 on mechanics and dodge dancing, whereas if you're here because you really want to improve your solo capabilities, or even if you just want to transition from Legend to Cataclysm, I've tried the best I can to pack with all the tools you need to clutch and defy the odds, like we're going to do in part 3, where we're going to go through a bunch of clutches and other high intensity scenarios I've had recently, while I try the best I can to analyze and explain both the logic and reasoning behind why I acted like I did. Last but not least, we have 3 quite a bit shorter but also interesting clips, each with a funny element and a hopefully useful gameplay point. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to Hatch from Fat Shark, whom I contacted last night to ask if they would sponsor me with a DLC key for a giveaway for my 1-year anniversary on YouTube coming up at the end of this month. To which he replied, and I quote, "Of course, buddy, we can fix you some DLC codes and a Pigmar or 2, which means sometime toward the end of the month, we're gonna have a giveaway. Now stay tuned towards the end of the video to find out how to win the first prize." Now, just to start things off on a light note, I have a couple of tips for competitive settings. Click Escape, Options, and under Key Bindings, by default, the space button has a multifunction as both jumping and dodge binding. Now, this will, and has very likely already, even if you weren't aware of the culprit, killed you on multiple occasions. Let me explain. In high pressure scenarios, the difference between a jump and a dodge can easily be life and death. As you can see here, I accidentally jumped. Now, the jump is what caused me to not be able to dodge once I then spotted the danger. I was mid-air and so I couldn't react. No scenario requires either jump or dodge. It always requires both, but at specific intervals. So separating the key bindings is really crucial to successful dodge dancing. Now, the most common deviation to this key binding is having your dodge on your left shift and your jump on space. Like, so you jump only on space and dodge only on your left shift. The same principle is relatable to weapon swapping, although not necessary. Now, you can, if you want, optimize the odds in your favor by removing the single largest risk of input failure, which is accidentally double tapping your quick swap under high pressure, returning to your original weapon. Instead, what you should do is bind all of the key bindings so you have both equip melee, equip ranged, and quick swap. This will allow you to spam the equip melee button as much as you like when you suddenly realize that Stormvermin's heavy attack is homing right in on your face. Personally, my own preferences are key bound to melee on Q, ranged on C, and quick swap on the extra mouse button. One last scenario where this applies is tagging and social wheel, where you should have tagging only. I have mine bound to the mouse, but you can bind it wherever you want, as long as you have the tag only and social wheel only separated. Also, you should preferably have a secondary mechanism for equipping healing tools, potions, and explosives. Like, I still keep my scroller functional, but I never use it in scenarios where speed is a factor, since it's unprecise and you might overscroll and end up with the wrong item in your hands. So I suggest keep binding them to a button, like I've done on 1, 2, 3. Now just quickly before we move on, let me just go through the basics of the Flaming Flail. Now in a nutshell, it is very similar to Kruper's Flail, with only two distinguishable features, the most noticeable of which is the change of the first heavy attack. Instead of two identical high cleave, high stagger attacks, it initiates with the low cleave, low stagger, overhead burning attack. Now the second difference is that it has a slightly faster light attack sequence. Now the light attacks are really strong on the Flail. This is because the two first attacks have both good stagger and cleave as well as armor damage. This is followed by two low stagger, low cleave but very high armor overhead attacks that can even hit through shields. This is also true for both the second heavy attack and the push attack. Now what also makes these attacks so strong is the added tank modifier, which in combination with your up to 60% extra power modifier on Unchained, allows you to easily stagger heavily armored elites. Now on top of being a contender for having the best attack sequence of all her weapons, it has the most common set of push block modifiers, a dodge distance modifier of 15%, and the highest effective dodge count of all her weapons with 4 effective dodges. Which very neatly brings me to the first part of chapter 2. Now the first thing you want to know is that the base hero movement speed when you exclude talents and items is identical across all classes, but on top of buffs and modifiers can be influenced by the attack sequence of whichever weapon you happen to be using. Some attacks speed you up, others slow you down. In the case of Kerylion's Spear, it is the release of the heavy attack that speeds you up. This is even more clear when you add a speed pot. Now speed pots increase your movement and attack speed by 50%, which means across a given span of time, the amount of movement speed increasing attack sequences you can get off is increased by 33%. In other words, if an attack animation increases your distance traveled, and you can do more attack animations in an identical time frame, then your overall movement speed will be increased by attack speed. This is true for the light attack sequence of all dual wield weapons, with the one noticeable exception of Sword and Dagger, where you have to do the push block into heavy 2. Other weapons, such as Kerylion's two-handed sword, first increases your movement speed but then slows it down. This means you have to do an animation cancel in order to actually get the value. Now this is difficult and requires practice, and is what most people use when they're doing actual speedrunning, in an attempt to hit a world record time on a specific map. Other weapons, however, such as Kruper's Spear, has a more relaxed approach. Here you simply need to hold the heavy attack in suspension in order to get a slight movement speed bonus. Now even though a minion like, let's say, a Berserker is faster than you and will always catch up to you eventually, he can't initiate his attack sequence prior to reaching you. This leaves a small gap between him reaching you and him attacking you, which with a certain movement speed can be utilized to prevent his attack from ever connecting with you. So you might be asking, well, that's all great, but what's the point? Although most prominent for solo runs, this feature is also really useful for clutches. And you know, understanding the underlying mechanics never hurt anyone's skills. Speaking of mechanics, let's move on to dodge dancing, or as I like to call it, the dance of daggers. Now, dodge dancing isn't just about dodging. Although it is a key feature, it essentially comes down to your ability to continuously move without ever getting stuck, even when the game is trying oh so hard to prevent you. Now, the first and most basic component of this is keeping a tab on your dodge count, in relation to your weapon's effective dodge count, and is reset after a period of half a second of not dodging, or more preferably if running for your life upon the completion of a jump. Now, one aspect of dodge dancing, which essentially comes down to practice and experience, is knowing where you're going without looking. Now, there are two reasons this is important. The first and most obvious of which is that your visual field is always going to be at a 90-degree angle in relation to the path you wish to travel while dodging. And doing so effectively and without getting stuck essentially comes down to how accurate your brain's internal three-dimensional model of the map is. Now, I'm not saying you should be able to go through the entire map without ever looking. Using small peeks while you're dodging is often the best course of action, but admittedly does take a bit of practice. Now, I don't know the exact size and structure of the hero's collision detection system, but I'm gonna assume it's most likely a sphere, which in the case of enemies is identical in shape but varying in size. It does, however, appear to be located at a certain height, low enough that a jump in certain cases can be the difference between getting through and being stuck, which is why any scenario where you're completely overwhelmed and surrounded, your best chance of getting out alive is to do a combination of pushes, jumps, and dodges. Now, the order in which you do that matters. The push is an attempt to create a gap, while the jump and dodge is an attempt to exploit said gap. Now, you are only very occasionally spamming your dodges the way you would spam left click to light attack. More often than not, what it comes down to is the timing of the dodge. You want to time it as late as possible, whilst still preceding the minion you are attempting to pass this attack push animation. So position yourself such that rather than dodging to the minion and then away from the minion, you want to dodge toward the minion, past the minion, away from the minion, if that makes sense. One last thing I thought I'd mention before we move on is pathing. Choosing which route you take through the terrain. Now, while the right path is always going to vary depending on minions and where they're positioned, a good rule of thumb in a last man standing scenario is to do like Obi-Wan Kenobi and always take the high ground. Now, the reasoning here is quite simple. You can move from high ground to low ground, while you cannot move from low ground to high ground, whilst also adding an extra animation between you and the army of murderous rats trying to kill you. This gives you just that bit of extra room, allowing you to figure out what the fuck you're gonna do next. Speaking of which, let's move on to game sense, why you need it, and why it's so bloody difficult. Whilst this isn't strictly true from the standpoint of theoretical physics, in relation to the actual gameplay, the spawn system is, for all intents and purposes, completely random, or more accurately, it has no discernible spawn patterns of any kind that might allow predictions or better than chance estimations of the specific special types of future spawns. Now, if you combine that with the knowledge that any disabler getting to you when solo is equivalent to death, and thus failure, you can see why you need an implacable game sense in order to determine the best course of action. Now, let's just take a look at the list of things you need to worry about in orders of priority on the highest difficulties of Vermintide. Attacking, blocking, pushing and dodging are pretty self-explanatory. Not getting surrounded, use your slowly developed Vermintide spider tingle sense. And if you haven't developed that yet, be a paranoid motherfucker. And regularly check your back, your dodge count value and stamina count value, your current levels of overcharge, or in other cases the amount of ammunition you have left, on top of your ranged weapons reload status. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Let's look at your secondary concerns. Things such as your HP and temp HP totals, and whether you have enough to spare, your career ability availability, which is everything for an Unchained, and knowing how to replenish your career ability most effectively, whilst also keeping a 3D mental model of your near to medium surroundings, ensuring that you don't accidentally dodge into a locked position. The spawn to death ratio of things like special disablers, and a 3-dimensional location approximation every time you hear a sound cue. But hold on, we're not done yet, because as soon as your own shit seems manageable, you need to start worrying about your team's shit. Where is everyone? Can we group up? Does anyone need your healing more than you? Maybe bother spending 2 seconds swapping items so that the shade gets the comp pot. Small things, all of which make a big difference. Also, if there's any leftover processing power in your brain by now, make sure that you aren't dead in the water, but is in fact always working towards an objective or a favorable defensive position. Thankfully for me, after 3,000 hours, I feel like I've learned to not waste my ulti on Unchained. So I had it ready here for this BS gunner. And trust me, it took a while. So in any duo scenario, you want to play off each other's strengths, right? You want to make sure that your positioning and the angles you cover are mutually beneficial. But unfortunately, in this case at least, it just wasn't meant to be. So everyone's dead, you're the last guy standing, you're not playing elf, what do? Obviously there's no easy answer here. In one way it's super simple, everyone's dead, you don't have to worry about anyone but yourself, and your objective is to save the team. But doing so in practice is obviously very complicated. I think being alone on Cataclysm difficulty is much like building a raft while you're sailing, simply doing the best you can with every action to keep it afloat. And you want to keep doing that until you have enough of a wiggle room to actually formulate a strategy or a course of action. Try to position yourself such that at most an assassin or strangler can come from at most 2 easily distinguishable directions. Essentially, the better you position yourself, the less work you have to do, well, to make it work. Now, in case you're going to wonder, the Discord sounds you're about to hear is from this actual video, but they were hard-coded and I couldn't remove them without also removing the in-game sound. Which is why I decided we should all have a moment of silence for our disconnected and fallen comrade, Patchy.
Patchy just messaged me and said that internet will not be coming back tonight. Yeah.
Now, anyways, admittedly, I had a pretty easy time on this run if you compare it to a normal Cataclysm clutch, simply because I didn't get any assassins or stranglers. Although I was positioned in a manner where I could deal with them until the end, I saw an opening and then I went for it. But hopefully it gave you a little bit of insight into where you go, why and for what reason. But with that said, let's move on. Now, this clip is a great showcase of the importance of both movement and positioning in relation to having multiple bosses or multiple threats. Now, one of the most important things in a scenario such as this is that you don't want to trip over yourself or your teammates. Meaning, if the boss is on you, you don't want to unnecessarily drag it in front of another player. Now, in a scenario like this, patience is a virtue, okay? You want to stay cool, calm, and collected. Like, there's no new attacks he can throw at you suddenly. So you need to be confident in your own ability to actually control the attacks that he does. As you can see, I did a small fail there. And really the worst thing you can do versus a Minotaur or a boss in general is be afraid of him, because that's just going to cause irrational changes to your pattern of inputs, and more often than not it's going to cause you to play horribly. Now, I do drink my health pot here, since I evaluated that a single attack was enough to potentially put me down, and then it's a 2 down, 2 up scenario versus 2 bosses with 2 more coming, which is just not an optimal scenario. Now, patience here really is a key feature. You might feel like you do nothing, you might feel forced to do DPS, like what are you gonna do? Am I just gonna dodge in circles? Yes, you're just gonna dodge in circles. You are adding value by making room for your teammates if the boss is on you. And I would strongly recommend to learn the timing for the forward going attack and having the balls to actually use it, even if you're just 1 attack away from dying. It's always gonna be preferable, because that way you can set the timer for when he initiates his attack animation. Whereas only moving back and away from him is just gonna make it harder to time and visualize the moment you're supposed to dodge. And once you get that and it's yours, Minotaurs just don't seem that dangerous anymore. Although admittedly they do have a harder attack sequence than, let's say, a Chaos Spawn. Now we really want to try and take the aggro away from Waystalker. She's our our best DPS by far. So if they're on her, she's not able to deal the damage that we want her to. Of course, it varies from scenario to scenario. But here, notice that I didn't even drink my strength pot or use my bomb, even though we were just faced with 4 monsters. Why? Well, because down here, I know for certain that unless there's a Twitch vote, I'm not gonna get a special spawn in my back. There's not gonna be a sudden random assassin, which means all of the mechanical factors are under my control. So assuming I play it properly, the game is rigged in my favor. Now, this next clip I essentially chose because it was my first run ever on the new map, running it on Kata, and I thought this would make it interesting for a couple of reasons. The first of which is that I would feel way out of my comfort zone. I didn't know where to go, I didn't know where to look for items, I didn't know good spots, I had no idea where specials would come from. To be quite honest, I wasn't even sure which way was forward in the map. Yet I managed to stay alive in a scenario or two here where I honestly thought I was gonna die. Now, here I almost got stuck, so I used the room I got from my ulti to just wiggle myself out of there, and I managed to get free. In a sort of panic, not knowing where I was going, I noticed the sledge here, which is going to be important later. Because really, if there's a spot that gives you room, you want to reuse it as many times as you have to until the boss is dead. Now, the greatest peril you can face in this game is often the unknown. Not knowing where to go, not knowing how you're going to get stuck if you keep moving backwards, not knowing where the specials are going to pop from. These are all unknown factors, and each of those unknown factors can lead to you getting wrecked. But the one known factor that I did have was that this ledge was super useful. So of course the first thing I did was I circled it again. Even though I hadn't played the map before, I just instinctively knew that that was going to be a way around, a circular motion that could sort of give me some room and some space. Now that really paid off with the firebomb, allowing me to take out most of the elites. Now, for a little while here, not that much was happening. We were basically just DPSing the troll, so I thought I might as well skip that. But eventually, we got overrun again. And once again, I had to do my best not to panic. Although, admittedly, I did, just a little bit, because of all the unknowns. I don't know what's at the top of this staircase. I'm not sure what's behind me. Now the dwarf disappeared. I'm not sure where to go. I'm taking a lot of damage. I see my teammate here. I decided our best course of action is to go down then, to gather the group and fight the boss in an open area, again choosing a known terror rather than an unknown terror. And as it turned out, this was just in time for Waystalker, who needed my help. And the rest was a pretty simple 4-man boss kill. Moving straight into an eerily similar scenario on the same map and the same hero and the same difficulty with the same weapon, fighting, you guessed it, the same boss. Now, I managed to kill this strangler that was grabbing my teammate, but shortly after I was trolled by this strangler over here, deciding to take the most annoying path of twists and turns to avoid getting killed. And I honestly decided to go full retard to save him because I thought his name was funny. I mean, Clit Wizard. But then I started thinking, Sienna has a Clit. She's a wizard. So could Sienna be a Clit Wizard? For some reason, I'm just totally not picturing a girl when I hear Clit Wiz, but I guess it's up to interpretation. Anyways, like, comment, and subscribe, or he's coming for your girlfriend.
Dude, you're a hero.
Thank you, Clit Wiz. I know I am amazing. And I was just kidding. It's gonna be a mom. No, for real. He's a nice guy. Okay, moving on, back to seriousness. Now, one of the most important things you can do with movement in this game is to try and ensure that everything you're fighting is on the same side. Successfully doing so is gonna allow you to focus all of your attention to one side, without constantly having to turn around. Now, for a while this all seemed fairly manageable. Everyone's alive, we're a little bit split up, but we're doing okay. But as you probably know in Vermintide, that can all change in a heartbeat. Now, we were holding our own pretty well, but the elf unfortunately died and no one was close enough to save her. Then we had a couple of special spawns, but we managed to get them without too much trouble. To be quite honest, I almost forgot for a moment that there was still a troll present, since I hadn't seen it for like almost 2 minutes. But once it came back, it managed to make an entrance, as we almost got wrecked. It came in from behind us, and unfortunately managed to take down our Kruber. Now, saving Kruber was a definite option, right until we got overrun by a bunch of monks, and saving Kruber was no longer a viable option. For a moment I thought Saltspire was gonna get wrecked as well, but obviously he was used to this much attention. He gets overrun on a daily basis, being a Clit Wizard and all, and thus we managed to move really effectively as a two-man crew. Now, it's really important in these scenarios that you don't move too far back in relation to your teammate, as you otherwise risk a minion that's initially attacking you, switching aggro and then coming from behind, killing your teammate. That is, of course, if Clit Wizards can really die. I'm not entirely sure, but I have heard stories they might be immortal. Now, we managed to pull through and we slowly chipped away at the monster's health, and we eventually managed to save both our teammates. All thanks to good positioning and equally important teamwork. But what is life without a bit of failure? So let's include one of those as well. Now, this was Cataclysm Switch mode, and we were getting overrun by assassins due to the Twitch vote with 200% spawns. And let's just say shit went sideways pretty darn quickly. Now, it seemed for a moment that we were gonna be fine actually, but I had one of those feelings in my stomach telling me that I have a feeling I should go over here. I feel like over there is just not the place to be right now. Now, it's entirely possible that if I had been over there I could have saved my teammates, but instead I was sent into this clutch, which was surprisingly close to succeeding, but then eventually failed. But I feel like any scenario where you're dealing with more than 3 assassins, you are allowed to click the panic button and just go, "Ah!" Which is exactly what I did once I realized I had no ammunition left either. So basically I just decided to make a run for it and hope for the best. And I mean, not to brag, but... oh, scratch that. In fact, only to brag. That assassin kill was pretty fucking amazing, if I had to say so myself. And since this is my video, I make the rules, buddy. Anyways, by the time I killed the last assassin, I realized I actually have a shot at this. Like, I might actually do this. So I tried to make a run for it, and this gunner nearly fucking shredded me. But eventually I managed to get through it. I drank the health pot, and I recall here thinking, please, I need ammunition, game. I need some fucking ammunition, or I'm screwed. And what? Oh shit, there's ammunition. And I totally underestimated the distance to the Strangler, and eventually trying to pick up the ammunition is what essentially killed me. I don't know about you guys, but as of the moment of recording this voice clip, I am really sick and tired of hearing my own voice. So all I'm gonna say about this one is, it's all about being creative with your gameplay. And then I'm gonna shut up for the entire rest of the clip. Yay!
See ya! Sure.
Fucking genius!
No.
Fuck it all! Fuck it all! Right over here!
I give you that!
Hello there. Did you miss me? If you didn't, then you better improvise, adapt, get Shrekt. Or, you know, just keep watching. Anyways, as you can see in this clip, we're having a pretty rough time. But if you notice the current Twitch mode, shit is about to get even worse. Then I got hit and now I'm at 1 HP. Now, I'm not sure what to do in this scenario. It's Kata, it's Twitch mode. I feel like I'm screwed. But that's when I see it. That's when I spot it. And I get that most wonderful of feelings. Could it be? Is it possible? No. Maybe? I better check it out just in case. And that's when I realized.
Fucking genius!
But like the point I'm trying to make is, if you spot something and you have an idea, try it out. Be creative. Like there's so many places in this game that give you an advantageous positioning. Now, I had never been on this pillar before. I didn't know it was gonna work. I was in a situation where I was basically fucked, which is why I thought, okay, what the hell, I'm screwed anyways, might as well try it out. And a little bit later, I did get wrecked. Also, it was never really viable to kill this amount of trolls and a chaos spawn alone, regardless, since the bosses would probably spawn faster than I could potentially kill them. But in a lot of other scenarios, this could have easily been the difference between winning and losing. And it all just came down to me looking at something and be like, this could actually work. But anyways, let's get to the giveaway. I've made you guys a little riddle, and the first person to comment on this video with the correct answer is gonna win it, so prepare to listen.
Once I had a mighty roar. Now I'm lying on the floor. A scary monster in a suite. What you seek, I try to eat. Solve my riddle, claim thy loot. What I am, rhymes with recruit.
Anyways, that's all for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe below. And just like in the days of old, by which I mean more than 6 months ago, I'm gonna leave you with a totally pointless explosion for absolutely no reason. Hey bro, are you okay? You don't look so good. Bob? Are you okay, Bob? They killed Bob. You bastards! Anyway, see you guys next time. Peace out!